Agent interfaces are more important than agent content.
I'm Daniel.
I'm Braden.
Let's jump into it.
Today we're talking about interfaces. So interface is what you're actually using when you use a chatbot, voice agent, whatever it is. It's that end interface for the customer. And we believe that it is more important than the content, which is a bit of a hot take. So Daniel, I want to kick this off by saying, what are some of the cool interfaces that you've seen on the interweb?
Yeah, so I think just starting from scratch, right? When you look at a lot of chat interfaces, it's traditionally been this chat widget in the bottom right corner. They are very isolated from the actual website itself. And so it's just an experience on its own. And so I think the thing that started to change that was obviously when you had ChatGPT and all of a sudden you had a full kind of web experience. But where I'm starting to see things going now is moving away from the idea of this agent being an isolated thing that is separate from your website or your web app. And it's a lot more embedded. And so in actual apps, you have this concept of a co-pilot, right? Something that's right alongside you and actually interacting with the app itself. So Cursor is a great example. And I think the most interesting thing that I'm starting to see is that co-pilots aren't just for apps. We're starting to see them, a lot of these agents interact more with a website. Yeah. And so I think where I'm seeing the biggest change, and honestly the change that probably appeals most most people in the mass market is how our websites changing.
Yeah.
And how our agents moving from this thing that is kind of right now isolated from the website to something that's actually more native within the website itself.
You're seeing a lot of different experiments with the interface. You're seeing OpenAI's recent operators where the interface is just the app you're actually using. It's not even a chat interface per se anymore. The interface is just the app itself. You even saw Cohere's, one of their founders recently tweeted, they're hiring an interface designer to explore new interface types, right? Because the chat widget in the bottom right corner has kind of been the paradigm for 10 plus years now. Yeah. But the capabilities have grown by orders of magnitude, but yet for most chatbots, it's still a little bottom right corner thing.
Yeah, and I think there's we're separating out two different parts, right? So one of them is you have the core base models themselves, and I think all of these are moving towards being this kind of omnipresent assistant for you.
Yeah. And
so I think one question is okay, for the base model, what is the best type of interface for that, given that it's supposed to be, or it kind of moving towards being an assistant for you, right? Being able to crawl the web, being able to search the web, being able to present different items to you Claude's artifacts, right? Actually write the code for you. Or
do you like Claude artifacts?
No. I mean, it's good for specific things, right?
Yeah.
I think the other part of this is certain interfaces are good for specific tasks.
Yeah.
Right. When I'm when I need help with writing code, artifacts is great because it shows me all the code there. Or when I'm trying to understand what a front end might look like. V0's interface is really great as well. It's rendering the front end right there. But when I'm asking it questions or trying to search the web, I don't need the artifact, right? Sometimes I'll ask it for help with the prompt or ask it a question and it'll write me code. And I'm this is not what I'm asking.
Yeah, it's really amazing when I remember I was doing some work for a customer and we're building an agent. We uploaded a PDF doc and I wanted to create a mermaid diagram to show all the different flows.
Yeah.
And then it beautifully rendered this mermaid diagram on the on the right, and that's awesome. And then other times it's give me restaurant recommendations and it's generating code and you're too much.
Yeah.
Too much.
Yeah. And I think a good example actually is Perplexity, right? I think they've nailed their interface for searching the web. So if I go ahead and be how many solar panels does it take to power the US? And I'll use Perplexity a lot for web search because I think that's the way that they created their UI around searching the web, providing you sources, being able to show you videos that it's coming from is really effective. But I don't really go to Perplexity for help with code.
Well, what's cool about a lot of the foundation model interfaces are starting to introduce the almost showing the chain of thought reasoning behind the scenes. DeepSeek does a good example or does a good job with that. The O1 models do a good job with that. And it's funny, you're actually starting to see that on the bottom, customer support facing chatbots. You're starting to see people emulate that type of interface experience where it has thinking, reasoning, et cetera, et cetera. And you can kind of spoof it too. Sometimes you don't even have to show the chain of thought, if you're using a really small model. Sometimes it's in the interface itself, you'll be hey, when you're making an API call, have it say I'm looking that up for you. Or if you have the, you're looking up a DB record or something, being pulling your information, being able to actually just give some feedback to the user on the interface of what the agent is doing, whether or not it's actually that reasoning is coming from the LLM model itself.
Yeah, but I think it makes sense in terms of like understanding what's happening behind the scenes.
Yeah.
Right. Because even when you're talking to someone normally, like, and I say this to people who are building like voice agents all the time on the phone, right? Your agent is going to do a lot of stuff like look up your phone number in a database, pull information. It's like all the same things a human would on the other side of the line.
Yeah.
But the difference is when a human's doing it, they're like telling you like, hey, give me a second. I'm gonna like look up your stuff in a database versus just being silent on the other end.
Yeah.
And so part of it, I think, is like being able to understand like a lot of these things have latency involved with them.
Yeah.
And so how do you best show someone what's happening behind the scenes so that they're more understanding of the latency? So rather than being just like it's taking forever to respond, it's like, oh, it's actually doing things behind the scenes. Well, this is what's going on.
Even like with voice interfaces in particular, like the whole use of like filler words, right?
Yeah.
Like, I hear a lot from folks that they want their like phone IVR that's doing lots of API calls and like validations behind the scenes to have the same like latency as feels like ChatGPT like advanced voice mode.
Yeah.
But often it's like there's no matter what you do, like you cannot make an API call faster. It's always going to be like a second to 2 seconds. If you have an internal API, it might be like 4 or 5 seconds, right? And so being able
doing with some pretty shitty APIs.
yeah, that's we've seen a bunch, right?
Yeah.
And so being able to use like a filler word where the agent is just like kind of filling the dead air a little bit. I mean, even actually.
I mean, it's kind of like the modern progress bar, right? Like, what's a progress bar for agents? Like, that's really what this is.
Yeah. Well, I mean, we've all used those like voice IVRs that are like super traditional, and it's like, press 1, press 2, and yeah, those are pretty fast. But there's often just a ton of dead space. Or even seeing innovations on the voice interface of like background audio. You're seeing audio cues, just like letting the user know, like, hey, we heard you. There's actually I saw a really interesting interface where they had input cues, and so as you were speaking to like over the phone, what the agent would actually do is play like keyboard clicking sounds, just to let you know that like it's thinking it's actually hearing you. And then even then, like once you stop speaking, the keyboard clicking stops, but you know that it was like it was hearing.
But I don't know if any of these things are actually like innovative on the interface side, right? Because like really all this is, especially like, and I think maybe putting phone calls aside, right? Because what all these voice agents on the phone are trying to get to is just get one-to-one with a human, so someone doesn't know that they're talking to an agent, right? Because you don't want to talk to an agent. But I don't think that's like actually being innovative. You're just trying to like all this background noise and stuff. Like, why is background noise even good?
Yeah.
Right. Like you're like, when I'm on a call, I'm trying to go to a quiet area. Yeah. So I think, but like moving aside from
it fills
that,
the space though, right? Like, because I think you want to tell the user like, hey, the thing didn't break. You know what I mean? Like if you have 2 seconds of latency, maybe that's like a standard API. You don't want the user, especially with Bargain 2 on voice as an interface. It's like, if you hear 2 seconds of dead space, the user might start saying other things, which might actually break the bot, right? It might activate the Bargain.
I agree with that, but I think that like at least when it comes to the topic of like interfaces, I think where the most interesting stuff is happening is on the web.
Yeah.
Is like visual interfaces.
Yeah.
Right. Like I think you're very limited with what you can do over like audio only. And so that's why when I look at a lot of the stuff that you see with the basic models, right, with Perplexity having a specific UI for search, with Claude having a UI honestly that's best for like rendering code and like rendering front-end elements, and then I think OpenAI trying to figure out what makes sense for them is kind of interesting. Because the other thing I see too is like, going back to the original argument of you have one angle that's like all of these base models trying to get to some sort of like specialized assistant.
Yeah.
Right. And then on the other hand, you have people's businesses and their websites.
Yeah.
Right. And like you may use your agent to surf a lot of these websites and to train information to you. But at the end of the day, if you need like a specific service, sometimes you're actually going to that website, you're going to that business to figure out what they do. Right. And so that's where I'm starting to see more stuff as well, where it's like, what do business specific agents look like?
Yeah.
And how does it change the way that people interact with companies and their websites?
Well, I think kind of like the transformation we're seeing is when agents first launched, it was like, your chatbot in the bottom right corner, and it was like a small little widget on top of your core experience, which was like the website or the mobile app or whatever. But I think now you're seeing like so that's like one extreme, right, where the chatbot is just like like an added on widget. The other extreme is Perplexity, where the whole agent is like that is the app, right, or ChatGPT, like the whole experience is the app.
Yeah.
And so you're starting to see some hybrids in the middle where instead of just having the agent be like a little thing in the bottom right, it's actually becoming the experience itself. Cool. And I think it begs the question, like, what do websites look like for brands in like 5 years?
Yeah.
As more companies move along that spectrum, eventually, like if you go to like a large banking website, is it just an agent? Is it like your branch experience?
Yeah, and I think that's I think the insight is like for me, it's websites are moving towards just becoming web apps.
Yeah.
And the experience is moving from what websites initially started as a like digital business card.
Yeah.
And so I was having a conversation with a couple of Webflow agencies, and it was kind of interesting to see how they're thinking about it too. And one of them was this Webflow agency in Australia, and he specializes in conversion rate optimization, right? And we had a good combo on this, where he works a lot with small businesses. And for small businesses, a lot of it is very transactional.
Yeah.
Like you are coming to the website, a plumber, for example, right? Like you're basically, you want a quote and you're calling them because you want to figure out like, hey, do they do what I need them to do? How much is this thing going to cost me? Can they come on time? And initially, websites were basically just digital cards. They just had a number on the website. They told you a little bit about it. And over time, websites started to become closer to actually talking to the end person themselves, talking to the end business or service. And so what he focused on was, figuring out how do we get that experience closer, and would build things like calculators, like figuring out for decking, right? What size of my deck? What materials do I want? Get me as close as possible to the quote, and then actually go and talk to the business owner. And I think that idea of like moving from a like virtual business card into something that is almost as good as talking to someone who's an expert about that service is kind of where a lot of these tools are going. And I think like where we're starting to see is agents move out of just chat widget and kind of be more embedded within these core UI elements.
Yeah.
And so also a couple examples, or at least one that I thought was pretty cool. So someone in the community built this for an e-commerce website called Sherpa. So this company does kind of like high-end portable batteries.
Cool.
Right, and so this is a really easy example because for e-commerce, like a very easy way is like the FAQ. I think like an easy thing to do, right, when you are like buying something expensive like this is the FAQ, right? Because you have a lot of questions about this. Like for me, if I'm buying this, like I care less about the battery and I care more about like what can it charge and can it charge a situation that like I'm looking for. And so a lot of times people go to FAQs, but what they did that I thought was pretty cool is they kind of embedded an agent in the product page to replace like this FAQ section.
Yeah.
So now instead of trying to scroll through and figure out like, will this charge what I need to, I can just go ahead and ask it like, okay, I'm doing an outdoor music event with like 2 PA speakers and my MacBook Pro. Can like how many hours?
Does that left bar, does that change the topic of conversation? Is that changing like the system persona?
This one?
Yeah.
So you'll see. So actually, like what's going to do is it's going to save my search into this left bar here after it's gone and done it. But here's another example, right? Cool. It's like it looks like he's got the actual what's going on in the background too.
Yeah.
So it's like, cool. Are you going to use these individually or simultaneously? I'm going to use them all simultaneously. Oh, this is pretty cool.
Searching on the internet. UX.
Yeah, and so all of a sudden, right, like this is a high-end product, and in the same way that I'd be talking to a sales, like a rep or someone who's an expert, I'm now talking to this part of the website. And it's making the actual website less of a static website and more of something that's actually, that I really engage with, right? And so
it's interesting how the streaming comes in for both the follow-up question, but also the content.
Yeah, it looks like he's running it in parallel to kind of increase the speed. But yeah, so it's cool. So for me, I'm like, okay, great. So this is actually going to run it for like about 9 hours. Like I can probably go and give it more information here. And then it saved my searches on the left-hand side here.
That's really cool.
And so this is where I'm starting to see websites move more towards.
This is kind of that like hybrid I was talking about where like the whole website is not an agent, but the agent is doing far more than just answer basic. If we actually look back to like the original chatbots for a lot of these websites, when you have a big banking website where it has like, let's say 1,000 pages, often the chatbots were actually just better navigation of the website because the content was all there. You were able to, I don't know, do like a electronic funds transfer. You were able to find like the ability to activate a new card, but there were so many pages that sometimes a natural language interface with just some buttons was easier navigation of the website, but it wasn't adding any new functionality. This is sort of moving a little bit further down the spectrum where it's actually adding functionality, not just helping you navigate a big site.
Yeah, exactly. And I think this is part of the core thing, right? Of like the agent's interface should match the objective of what you're trying to do.
Yeah.
Right? Like you don't need a canvas here that is building code for you. Like it doesn't make any sense. But like for me, when I'm going to a website, and websites are like the primary way that people interact with businesses today and honestly for the far future. And so in that sense, like if my goal is to understand more about a specific product or a specific company, how does the agent I start to build become a core part of that experience? And how does my website move from something static to becoming more of like a dynamic web app?
So let's push this thought a little bit further. should Sherpa even have a website in that? Like, it's a bit of a thought experiment. Should it just be an agent at this point?
Well, I think that's like a good question, right? Because you look at e-commerce, and part of e-commerce is also like browsing the products that are there.
Yeah.
And I don't know if I've seen a better browsing experience, right?
Yeah.
It's one thing to say when you are going for you have a very specific problem that you're going for, and you want to solve that problem quickly.
Yeah.
Right. So I think a lot of these transactional services, right, like a plumber, like you just need to talk to an agent at that point.
Yeah.
You don't care about browsing what's there. But for something like e-commerce, for example, like I'm looking for portable battery. I'm actually kind of curious of what's out there.
Yeah.
I may not have it, like I may be different parts of the funnel, right? I may know exactly what I want or don't. And based on that, I need a different interface. So let's say, for example, it's actually serving up like a targeted ad, right? Because I have now given Google my search intent that I'm looking for a portable battery, like a certain milliamp or whatever it is, right?
Yeah.
Maybe that's the best experience to drop someone right into a product page or even to an agent that's like, hey, here are like 6 batteries that we offer that meet your use case because of X, Y, Z. Click into one of them and we can talk more about it.
Well, the other thing too is this website's beautiful, right? It shows off their brand. They've got some beautiful sort of product imagery. I don't think we've seen chat or sort of like agent interfaces crack the ability to display your brand, right, on the marketing side of things.
Yeah.
Because yes, like they're very functional, but like if every brand just had a chat, if you went to the website and it was just a single chat agent, they're all gonna look the same. You're not gonna be able to get that across.
And this is where I think like it's getting interesting. So I kind of went more down this like Webflow rabbit hole.
Cool.
Because so the person who built this, his name is Alex. He runs a great agency. We'll put it in the chat. And he built this on Shopify. And so what I saw, there was a couple folks. So someone at here, South Digital. One sec. His name is Zach, he's in the Voiceflow community as well. Like he builds a bunch of interfaces with Voiceflow and Webflow, where he actually uses like the Webflow components to create more of that like agent experience. Yeah. And so we worked with him specifically on redoing our like the Voiceflow demo form, right? Because traditionally the demo form looks like, it was like a HubSpot one. So you go in there, you put in your information, you submit. And so we work with Zach to say, cool, can we build an agent that replaces our demo form, where you can actually go and talk to it, it'll qualify you, it'll like go and enrich your information with Clearbit, it'll go create all the stuff in HubSpot, but the experience on the user end is actually talking to an agent to like better describe their use cases, ask questions, almost like talking to like a rep.
Yeah.
And so what he was able to do is actually build this right in Webflow with our website using all of our core like components.
Yeah.
So it feels like a really native part of the website.
Here, give it a little test.
Yeah. So like one thing that's interesting that we found with this form is that our demo form was meant for people booking demos.
Yeah.
A lot of people were coming to it, and the actual completion rate of that form was like 6-7%.
Yeah.
Right. It's kind of typical of what you see with the form. So we replaced it with this agent, and that completion rate actually jumped to 21%.
Wow.
Of people who were landing on this page. But the other interesting thing was that a lot of people who were coming here were actually just looking for help to like talk to someone.
Now here's a question for you. Do we think that the 3x in conversion is because it's very easy to fill out a form, and this is actually weeding out, like, did we see the top line of actual conversions come down? You see what I'm saying? Like 1,000 people come in, it's so easy to fill out a form that you have, only 7% of people go ahead and actually do it because you're like, you know what, whatever. Versus when you have a little bit more effort in, people are actually going to go ahead and complete that form. Like it essentially gets rid of the people who are just can kicking, right?
Yeah, I think it's actually kind of interesting because what we found when we released this was like, the completion rate was a lot higher, but a lot of people actually were coming to our demo page for support.
Oh, interesting. So this actually weeded out a lot of the folks who...
Yeah, exactly, right? So if someone comes here and they're like really quickly about like, what is your pricing? It's going to be able to answer that like based on the information that we have in the knowledge base. So it's like, cool, here's our like 3 plans. And then it's like, okay, cool, like I think I need enterprise, like let me go book a demo. And start actually going. And so this is what we see where people actually come in, they might ask a couple other questions first. And then they'll go into being like, okay, I actually need a demo, or I'm actually an agency, I want to go to the agency program. And so by kind of like taking somewhere where we know that people are going to and building more of an experience around it, we're able to not only like increase the conversion rate, but also help people get to where they need to go.
Yeah.
So the demos that we are booking, they're actually higher quality.
If someone comes in here and they say like, I need support, is it going to kick them out to our support bot then?
Yeah, good question. Right now, it just kind of says, cool, like email support at Voiceflow. But what we're doing is we're building in an entire support flow. So someone can come in here and ask what questions that they want, kind of like the pricing question, but get way more in depth. And it'll actually just handle them in this form itself.
Yeah. That's interesting that the conversion rate went up. Despite, because you would actually imagine the conversion rate, if we're getting a lot of like false positives on that simple form, a lot of them were support, you would actually expect the conversion rate of like people actually successfully completing the form to be much higher on the original form.
Yeah.
Right? Because it would still be taking in support requests and, pricing requests, all this kind of stuff.
Yeah.
But the fact that it actually went up as well as triaging folks out means like the actual raw conversion rate is probably even higher than just 3x.
Yeah. And like, at least for this one, we're looking at like conversion rate in terms of like completing the form experience, right?
Yeah.
So in this case, it would be hitting one of our end paths.
Yeah.
So they have either successfully booked demo, they've been disqualified from a demo, or they've gone down our support path and reached the end of it, or they've gone down our partnership path and reached the end of it, right? So we're looking at like how many people came to this page, started a conversation with the agent, and then actually finished the conversation with the agent.
I can imagine where this goes, and I'm sure your team's already talked about it, but like someone fills in a form and immediately like they get an outbound call from a phone bot. Hey, I'm here from Voiceflow. Just want to further do some qualification just to really save our human time.
Yeah, 100%. And the goal actually of this was like, cool, we want to do a couple things, right? One of them was like, I'm like, okay, I want to replace all the forms websites with agents because we want to be able to get users to value faster, even with that form experience. And the experience today is like pretty broken, right? Where you're filling out this form, then you got to wait for an email, then you got to wait for someone to reach out. And it's like, let's just get them help now. And so one of the things we wanted to do was turn this into more of like a AI account exec experience or AI expert experience, right? Where like you're coming here, you're talking to a Voiceflow agent, you're able to understand like, okay, for your core basic questions, does this meet your needs?
Yeah.
And then if you're qualified, being able to do that, I will collect more information from you, answer more of your questions. So by the time that you're actually talking to a rep, you've answered a lot of your basic questions. And then you and the rep can get into like actual conversation.
Yeah,
right.
So like saves the customer time, saves the account exec time,
exactly,
everyone time there.
And we find a lot of people ask a couple questions on this first before they actually go on.
Oh, that's interesting. And because it's hooked up with the knowledge base, it's unlike a standard form. They're able to almost like self-disqualify. Hey, actually, you know what? I don't even need this.
Yeah, 100%. And two, like, right now you can book a demo immediately through here once you get qualified.
Yeah.
And we're doing enrichment on the email, right?
Yeah.
So it's like we want to check if an email is over a certain point. Actually, if the email, we have like 3 categories. So there's obviously the big companies, which you can book demo right away.
Yeah.
Then there's these middle ones. They're smaller companies, but if they're doing a high volume use case, they should actually talk to a rep.
Yeah.
So there's actually a couple questions in here that ask like, okay, what kind of experience are you building? Like, how many people do you think will interact with it? And then we've got logic that says, based on the company size, if their interactions are high or if they're building a certain type of experience, put them through the talk to a rep. If not, then we're going to put them through a different path.
Yeah.
To say, hey, maybe this isn't the best tool for you, or go ahead and try our like free and pro plans. You can start there.
Yeah.
And then ramp up and then talk to a rep.
When you review the transcripts, are people getting frustrated that they can't talk to a human right away?
No, most people are just asking questions.
Really?
Yeah, the frustration comes from more like, we like released this pretty recently, so we're making more improvements to it as we go. Yeah. But sometimes people will come right off the bat with a really complex question and it doesn't answer in the best way.
Yeah.
But that's really where we're trying to get better to say, okay, if someone's asking a really complex question, like how do we make sure that we can answer it in a way that is like accurate?
Yeah.
Or perhaps like triage the question a bit more to get like a bit more granular.
So I know we have our Tico support agent that runs like on Discord. It's runs in-app as well. Is this an interface for that? Is this a multi-interface agent, or is this a one interface, one agent?
Right now, it's one interface, one agent. So like to kind of show what Braden we were talking about.
So why did you choose to build it with that kind of interface?
Just to start off, but yeah, if we go to let's say like the help channel here, you can see that. Let's see here. Yeah, whenever someone asks the channel like a question in help channel, our like Voiceflow agent will actually go read the question and then create a thread and actually respond to the thread, right? And like in certain cases, actually attaching code whenever it needs to. And so this is able to help get a lot of users like an answer to their question really fast. And then, we'll follow up here, make sure things are accurate. There's like a rating system in here.
Yeah.
But we built this really specifically for Discord because it's also able to pull things like their role in Discord. Are they a developer? Are they not a developer?
Let's double click on the rating system. Does that actually, like, how does that human in the loop feedback iterate on the actual answer quality?
Oh yeah, Nico built a system on our side where basically like if people rate it well, then that like there's like more weight given to like this actual piece of information for this question.
Right, well, as it pulls from the knowledge base, or is that iterating on the prompt? Is it iterating on the knowledge or the prompt?
It's iterating on the knowledge and like which knowledge to pull for like better questions.
Got it. That's
but he's built a full custom system on the back of this for it, and so it's a bit more involved. But at the beginning, it was like human in the loop, right?
Super cool.
Where we go in and be like, okay, these answers are bad, like just because this information's out of date, we need to update it, right? When we release voice, we have to update a bunch of stuff.
So we've got a Discord agent, we've got an in-app help agent, we've got a lead gen agent. These are all running off of, sort of single agents with a single interface.
Yeah.
Do you see a future where you have a single Tico agent with multiple interfaces?
Yeah.
Why have we not taken that approach today?
Well, this one we just wanted to get something out quickly.
Yeah.
But realistically, like the knowledge base we probably need for this will be the same knowledge base that we have for the Discord bot because it's been like really refined over time.
Yeah.
And so, yeah, like that knowledge base should actually be shared between like our in-app assistant and this and Discord. So
the actual building, so the knowledge makes sense, but the actual building of the agent though.
Yeah.
Do you foresee most folks, like let's say like 2-3 years out, being able to build a single like agentic prompt that is able to handle multiple interfaces, or do you think that folks are going to really segment agents and interfaces for a while to come?
I think at least for the short term, like just being honest, like we found it easier to be able to build specific agents for specific interfaces because sometimes you like this one on Webflow has a bunch of custom actions that are tied to Webflow components.
Yeah.
Right. So like this thing over here, like hi, I'm Tico Voiceflow's agent, is actually, and this one up here are actually custom actions in Voiceflow that are like sending basically information to the front end to render different UI elements.
That's cool.
So if I like go through here, right, and I go through this like book a demo flow and I go through the thing I did last time, so Daniel and Daniel at voiceflow.com, you'll notice that like it's going through a bunch of enrichment right now in the back end, but it's going to then pull my name and then pull it into this component up here.
That's probably where that latency is coming from then, because you're actually setting that the clear bit, you're pulling company size, any role information.
Yeah, we're sending clear bit, we're enriching it. We're actually also creating a contact in HubSpot.
Oh, interesting.
And so like now that we've added more stuff, there's probably more like thinking stuff we can probably add behind the scenes here.
Yeah. So HubSpot, for folks who might not know, is just the CRM we're using on the marketing side.
Yeah, but you can see here, like, thanks for providing your name, Daniel. Let's get started. Because it pulled my name into this custom action. And then on the top here, it actually moved from like info collection to,
that's great,
or identifying to info collection.
Yeah, it's a nice, I always love UXs that show the customer sort of like their progress.
Yeah.
Because you don't want to go through like an endless number of forms, but like, okay, I can go through a little bit of pain here because I see I'm on step 2 or 3. I'm almost done.
Yeah, 100%. And if I go through this too, like, okay, like I'll just be really quick with it. The customer support agent, and then it's gonna ask me like how many like interactions or how many people are interacting with it. Great use case, Daniel. How many people? Let's say like probably 10,000 people. It should go through, actually maybe it needs to be higher, let's see. Okay, cool, so here it disqualified me. But if I had maybe higher interactions or my company size was bigger, it actually pulls out a component that says, cool, here's like a quick summary of what we talked about. This is your email, is correct, and it's an editable component. So you can actually go in and change the email if you want.
Yeah.
But like for this interface, there's a lot of custom actions that are tied to it because we want custom UI elements on the front end to be appeared, right? For Discord, it's very different because instead we're doing a lot of just stuff via the Discord API. And so for right now, like it kind of makes sense to have an agent per interface because you want it to be really tightly coupled to that interface.
Yep.
But I think as time goes on, it does make sense to make it more like one agent multi-interface. We just have to figure out like, different front end things happen in different places. So how do we make sure it happens on one side and not the other?
Yeah, my question was a bit of a leading question as, I often, I think in our industry, you see a lot of companies where they talk about like, you build one agent once and you deploy everywhere, right? Now the challenge is like, do you think about each interface, interface kind of being like, it's synonymous with channel here, it's like WhatsApp, SMS, email, et cetera. It's almost like a Venn diagram where each channel has its own native capabilities, right? So like Apple Business Chat has native capabilities, WhatsApp, native capabilities, voice, et cetera, et cetera. The only thing, like if you kind of listed all these Venn diagrams, the only common denominator is text, right? And so when I've, companies come in and say, hey, so-and-so company talked about build one agent, deploy it everywhere.
Yeah.
They're either talking about a really simple agent that is just text, or they're talking about a Frankenstein build experience behind the scenes where you have to add in all the little exceptions per channel.
Yeah.
And so we've actually done work like this before where voice and chat can be done a little bit more easily, but you actually have to set like, if you want to use all the capabilities of chat, for example, like carousels, buttons, things like that, you actually have to change up the LLM prompt per channel so that when it comes in, you have a conditional prompt. You say, hey, look at the interface. If it is this channel, use this prompt. If it's this channel, use this prompt.
Yeah.
Because the other thing, even voice, like you might want to use bullet points. So yes, it's still chat, but like on chat, you want to use bullet points. On voice, you don't want to use any bullet points, right? You want it to be a lot more conversational.
Yeah.
So you end up having a completely different experience. And I think in a few years, as models get better, you might be able to start prompting in a way where it can actually handle all channels in a single interface because you're having to respond, hey, if this is voice, respond with this sort of format. If this is chat, respond in this sort of format. But if you're doing more than 2 channels right now, it would just blow up the prompt. And you're just adding so much unnecessary computation into every single step versus just building things separately and having some reusable components, right? Like maybe it's some sort of API call that's reusable. Hey, I'm just going to create a component for this, but I'm going to go build like my prompts for chat, my prompts for voice, and they can both pull in that like auth component or something like that.
Yeah, I think that makes sense. At least for right now too, I think even for us, right? Like as we work with like people who are innovating on these interfaces, like a lot of people are still trying to figure out like what is the best way to do this.
Yeah.
And so for right now, it does make sense just to have like one agent focus on the interface and make that really, really good before we do anything else. And like to give you a sense of what's happening behind the scenes here, like let me just move some of these closer together. Like there's a ton of stuff happening like in that demo form, from like capturing an email, we're upstreaming a HubSpot contact, we're then like actually enriching it with Clearbit, we're running a logic to figure out like which path do we send people down.
Yeah.
And then here's these custom actions that I was talking about, right? Cool. Like we're basically sending like a progress update to the front end to then change the stage based on where someone's at. We're like, basically writing a custom acknowledgement message that's then sending a payload to the front end as well. So there's a lot going on that's very tightly coupled to that front end.
A lot of this is interface logic. It's not conversation logic.
Yeah, a lot of this is interface logic. Like the actual conversation itself is like fairly straightforward, right? Where like right now we're just asking a bunch of questions, but in other areas it's just a loop with AI where it's like answering a question. And so a lot of this is actually built around the interface because we want to basically keep people in a loop to answer their questions. And then as they go down a certain path, like booking a demo, we're sending them more on a straight line where we want to connect specific pieces of information.
Yeah.
And based on certain points in that conversation, we're using that information to trigger some sort of front end component or front end UI.
Yeah.
Right. And so actually like what's interesting too is like, I think more and more will happen is like my thought is that a lot of agent builders will actually move towards being like interface orchestrators.
Yeah.
Right. Where the actual underlying model is handling most of the conversation, a lot of the API calls and figuring out what to do. And where you actually need to integrate with the front end is that's where you need an orchestrator, right? To be like, at this specific point, or if users said the specific thing, we want to render these specific front end components, and here's the information we want to be able to pass to and from. And like, that can be really basic, but I think as you get more complex and you want to have a lot more control over that like front end UI experience, so especially when it's something like a website and you're interacting with a lot of different components on the front end, that's where like an orchestration type of platform for that is like very valuable.
So do you think the work should be done on an agent orchestration platform like Voiceflow, or do you think that website builders are going to start introducing some of this orchestration?
Yeah, good question. I think it's both. I think it'll both kind of go towards it, right? Like, because Webflow is already like adding more AI stuff in to their website, but I think when it comes to this like interlayer between like your backend services and your front end, which in this case would be a website, like I do think that there's going to be something in the middle, because like the website builders themselves can probably handle a lot of simple basic use cases.
Yeah.
But once you got into like the more complex territory of like, I have custom backend services I want to integrate with, like I want to be able to handle a lot of different business logic, like that's where you actually need like an orchestrator, right? And the question is, are you building this in code yourself, or are you using something that's like easier for collaboration, like a builder?
Yeah.
And I think that's always going to be the conversation you're going to ask yourself, especially when you move towards like more complex production agents. Is, do I write this in code myself, or do I use some sort of builder so I can make it easier to collaborate with people on it?
It's going to get really messy between what is an agent and what do we just consider like a core app today. So a good example of this is like, let's say, a website that's built with Webflow. Over the past 10 years, you've seen a lot of like A/B optimization tools where like it might change the copy based off where you are, like simple little things, right?
Yeah.
But what if the actual website itself is starting to change as you use the website, right? As it profiles, okay, hey, this is a hobbyist user or this is an enterprise user, the actual website itself is going to change dynamically. At what point is that not just almost considered an agent, right? And behind the scenes, a lot of that like orchestration of the front end is being done with LLMs, it's almost an agent in that degree, right? Like it gets a little messy between what is an agent and what is an app. At some point, they're almost all the same thing, but it might look like a website.
Well, that's the thing, right? And I think like, and that's what my initial point was around, like, I think websites are changing to web apps.
Yeah.
And I think honestly, apps are going to be synonymous with agents, because agents are just a core functionality of an application.
Yeah.
Right? Like it's just changing the way that you interact with it, changing the way that it's interacting with the backend system.
Yeah.
And making the experience overall a lot smoother and a lot more personalized.
An example I've given before is like, I would love if Netflix was almost a little bit more like an agent. We've all had the experience where you're scrolling trying to find something you like. There's too many options. By the time you get to the bottom of the page and you go back up to the top, it's almost a conversation that, it's implicit conversation that you have sent to Netflix saying, hey, I don't know what to watch.
Yeah.
Right? At that point, refresh the UI, suggest something, when you get back up to the top top of the page. It's a completely new set of items. Like that's a conversation to some degree. I'm just not saying anything.
Yeah.
Or even, with Shopify, there's a lot of times where maybe you're searching and you just can't find the right item, whatever it is. That is a implicit conversation that you're having with that app.
Yeah.
Where that app, if it was a little bit more agentic, says, hey, look at their profile, look at the items that they've looked for. They keep scrolling around. Clearly, they can't find what they're looking for, or they don't know how to do something.
Yeah. Yeah, I think it's a really good point. It's that like conversations can be implicit or explicit.
Totally.
That's actually pretty interesting. But yeah, like I think like in terms of like an agent versus an app, like at a certain point it's all semantics, right? Because it's like at the end of the day, the user is trying to accomplish something. In Netflix, it's like entertainment, right? I'm trying to find a good way to spend time. I want to be able to watch a show, and your app is just like your interface of like what is the most effective way to get you to that end goal.
Yeah.
And like an agent is just the orchestration of how this app is working.
Yeah.
And so regardless of what words we use, like at the end of the day, these are all like applications, and it's figuring out like for the interface, for the UI experience, like what the user is going through, like what is the best one to be able to help them get to their objective.
Yeah.
And so yeah, whether it's Netflix and it's a visual interface, whether it's completely voice, whether it's completely chat, I think that's something that we're going to figure out, but that's very use case specific.
Yeah. So I want to kind of wrap up on one topic as we're kind of leading into it, which is like copilots as an interface. Because I think you're starting to see, and when I talk about copilots, I think what you showed with Sherpa is to some degree a copilot, right? It's trying to help you do something.
Yeah.
But I think what is really interesting is a lot of the copilots that are launching where it's actually helping you do a very complex action, and it's actually taking some of the work off of you, the user, right?
Yeah.
So a lot of the stuff we're showing here is information.
Yeah.
But it's not maybe like, doing something. Replit's a great example where it's essentially an IDE that's browser-based. What's really cool though is they have a copilot where they've built this awesome IDE over the past, 5, 6, 7 years now. But now they have a copilot experience where you're actually using an agent to do the work on top of this platform for you, right? And it really changes what you could even think of as an agent, from like informational to this is the way to actually get work done on top of the platform I'm using. You're seeing Salesforce do this, Replit's now doing this, Cursors, like the entire experience is really a copilot. It really changes how you think about sort of agents in general, from informational to this is actually the core way that I interact with the app itself.
Yeah, that's what you're referring to, right? Like this copilot on the side, like there's this functionality.
Yeah.
And then obviously they've got their like agent builder as well, or what's it called? Like their Replit agent, right?
Yeah, they've two. They have like Replit agent and they have Replit assistant.
Right, and assistant is helping me understand the code, and like agent is actually building the code for me.
Yeah, it completely changes the way you think about SaaS apps the more you use these types of tools.
Yeah.
Where, and I know today's sort of topic is on interfaces, but diving a little bit more into these like copilot style interfaces, it completely changes what the app is.
Yeah.
So it's kind of like SaaS 1.0 was like you have a problem and you have like a software that solves a very particular problem, right? Like a point solution. SaaS 2.0, sort of like a platform, right? We have a set of tools like a browser-based IDE. It allows you to solve many, many different problems, but you have to do all the work. Yeah. These copilots are going a step further in kind of this like SaaS 3.0 where, yes, I have a platform that gives you observability and the ability to actually go make the changes yourself, do the work yourself, but the AI can also just do the work for you, right?
Yeah.
Like you don't even have to, like the platform's still there if you need to make changes, but as you can see here, it's able to go ahead and generate code. It's able to actually go build out a SaaS app. And then you can always go into that like SaaS 2.0 platform interface to go make changes yourself, understand how it works.
Yeah.
But a lot of the heavy lifting is actually done by the copilot itself, which is totally different than a lot of the bots you see today, which are purely just like information exchange.
Yeah, 100%. Yeah, I think this is super interesting. Like Replit's agent builder is like fascinating because like I use this and I use Cursor quite a bit, but being able to actually, yeah, you're right, like show you how to use the tool itself and then actually do it for you. Is super interesting, and I think it goes again to the point of like, what is this application? What is it trying to do? Like I'm using Replit because I'm building an app, an interface, like whatever it is, right?
Yeah.
And so it's a builder, and so it makes sense for this agent to actually build it for me.
Yeah.
And then the question is like, what is the best way to show you how to do that while still giving you that aspect of control and understanding what's happening?
Yeah.
Which is why I'm using a tool like Replit or something else.
But you've seen there's LMs are really good at coding because there's so much data on so much sort of code data out there for them to ingest, and it's also really just structured logic, which is where often these LMs really excel. So I think you're seeing a lot of what is going to transform the rest of the SaaS industry take place first in coding tools, right?
Yeah.
Cursor, Copilot, Replit Agent, Devon's another interesting one, and you see a spectrum on these tools where you have more of a cursor style where it is there to assist you and it can do some of the work for you, but you still have that full observability. It's still very much an IDE. All the way to the other end of the spectrum, like what Devin is trying to do, where it just does the whole thing for you. Like there is less observability. The agent, like you give it a task and it just goes and does it, right? Yeah. And you're seeing this spectrum, and it's gonna be interesting because I think Devin is probably right 5-10 years from now. Yeah. But I think when the LM models aren't as good, people are sort of preferring the cursor approach, which is why that company is just completely just blown up recently, right? Yeah. They've done incredibly well. And I think it's because people still want to see what's happening behind the scenes. They want to work in increments versus that whole just do the whole thing at once for me.
Yeah, 100%. Yeah. That's a good point. Yeah, I think at the end of the day, it's like right interface for the goal. Yeah. Right? Like I use cursor over replit agent because I want that level of control.
Well, also the right interface for the current moment in technology, right?
Yeah, that's true. That's a good point.
There's, if you go back to that spectrum, if AI could do exactly what you needed to do perfectly every single time, Devin is the right approach, right? They just put as minimal overhead on the user as possible. But until it's able to do that, you need to sort of have this incremental approach where you have all the visibility in the IDE and you're able to increment with the AI sort of hand in hand. But I think, just again, looking at where models 2 years ago were to where they are today, I think you can see like Devin's got the right approach long term, but the Copilot's working at increment right now. Cursor replit, I think, is the right interface for sort of the moment in technology.
Yeah, it's a really interesting point.
Well, I think next week we're going to be chatting about the death of SaaS, quote unquote, with agents and things like that. We can probably end it here. Yeah, talk about interfaces. But hey, hopefully this was interesting for everyone. We want to do sort of a casual riff-based approach, just talking about a different topic every week, right? So this week was interfaces. Next week, we want to talk a little bit more about how SaaS is changing. We started to get into that a little bit at the end today. And we're going to be doing this every week. Humans talking about agents. So thanks for tuning in. Thanks, Daniel, for taking the time. And we'll see you next week.
Hey, everyone.